The medieval ages, also known as the Middle Ages, spanned approximately from the 5th century to the late 15th century. This period followed the collapse of the Western Roman Empire and acted as a bridge between ancient and modern history. Often called the Dark Ages, a term that paints it as a time of stagnation and chaos, the Middle Ages were, in fact, a period of profound change and growth. Though marked by frequent wars, plagues, and societal challenges, this era also witnessed the evolution of feudalism, the rise of Christianity, and the emergence of cultural and technological innovations that laid the groundwork for the Renaissance. Following the fall of Rome in 476 CE, Europe faced a fragmented political landscape. Centralized authority dissolved, giving way to competing kingdoms and tribal territories. The absence of Roman infrastructure and governance created a vacuum of power that invited invasions from groups like the Visigoths, Vandals, and later, the Vikings. While this instability earned the period its dark label, it was also a time of rebuilding and adaptation. Europe began to reshape itself around localized power structures, most notably the feudal system. Feudalism became the defining socio-political system of the medieval world. Rooted in mutual obligations, feudalism relied on the relationships between lords and vassals. Monarchs distributed land, or fiefs, to noble lords in exchange for loyalty and military service. These lords, in turn, granted portions of their lands to knights, who served as armored warriors. At the bottom of this hierarchy were the serfs or peasants, who worked the land in exchange for protection and a meager living. The rigidity of this system left little room for social mobility, with one's birth largely determining one's place in society. For peasants, daily life was a struggle for survival. Their days were consumed by hard labor, tending crops, and maintaining the land they farmed. Agriculture was central to their existence, and they relied heavily on tools like wooden plows and oxen to till the fields. The rotation of crops was essential to prevent soil depletion, and the success of a harvest dictated the community's well-being. Homes were modest, often constructed from wattle and daub, with dirt floors and thatched roofs. Meals were simple, featuring bread, porridge, and seasonal vegetables, while meat was a rare luxury. The church was an integral part of peasant life, offering spiritual solace and organizing community gatherings. For the nobility, life was markedly different. Lords and ladies lived in castles that served as both residences and fortresses. These structures, initially wooden, evolved into stone strongholds designed to withstand sieges. Castles were equipped with defensive walls, moats, and towers, as well as grand halls for feasting and chapels for worship. The nobility spent their days managing their estates, hosting elaborate feasts, and participating in cultural pursuits such as hunting, jousting, and music. Education was a privilege of the elite, often limited to boys who trained in the arts of warfare or governance, while noble women focused on managing households and securing advantageous marriages. Religion permeated every aspect of medieval life. The Catholic Church was the most powerful institution in Europe, wielding influence over kings and commoners alike. It acted as a unifying force in a fragmented world, providing spiritual guidance and moral authority. Monasteries became centers of learning and preservation, where monks meticulously copied ancient manuscripts, ensuring the survival of classical knowledge. Cathedrals, like Notre Dame in Paris and Canterbury Cathedral in England, exemplified the grandeur of Gothic architecture with their soaring spires, stained glass, and intricate carvings. Pilgrimages to sacred sites were common, reflecting the deep piety of the era. The Church also played a central role in the Crusades, a series of religious wars aimed at reclaiming the Holy Land from Muslim control. Beginning in 1096, these campaigns brought together knights, nobles, and peasants under the banner of faith. While the Crusades achieved limited military success, their impact on European society was profound. They facilitated cultural and economic exchange with the East, introducing new goods, ideas, and technologies to Europe. Spices, textiles, and knowledge of medicine and mathematics enriched medieval life, even as the wars fueled animosity between religious groups. Medieval warfare was a constant presence, shaping the politics and culture of the time. Armies consisted of knights, foot soldiers, and archers, with the mounted knight becoming a symbol of martial prowess. Advances in weaponry and armor, such as the development of chainmail and later full-plate armor, enhanced the effectiveness of knights in battle. The longbow and crossbow revolutionized warfare by allowing infantry to challenge armored knights from a distance. Siege warfare was equally important, with castles serving as key defensive structures. Engineers developed siege engines like trebuchets and battering rams to breach these fortifications, while defenders relied on innovations such as boiling oil and murder holes to repel attackers. The introduction of gunpowder in the late medieval period marked a turning point in military technology. cannons became a formidable force, capable of destroying castle walls and altering the dynamics of siege warfare. By the end of the medieval era, the traditional feudal army was giving way to professional standing armies, reflecting the increasing centralization of power in emerging nation-states. Perhaps the most devastating event of the Middle Ages was the bubonic plague, also known as the Black Death. This catastrophic pandemic arrived in Europe in 1347, likely through trade routes connecting Europe with Asia, and it spread with astonishing speed. The bacterium Yersinia pestis, carried by fleas living on black rats, was the primary cause of the disease. These rats often traveled aboard merchant ships, facilitating the plague's reach into nearly every corner of Europe. Within a matter of years, the Black Death killed an estimated 25 to 50 million people, roughly one-third of Europe's population. The speed and lethality of the plague were staggering. Victims typically developed fever, painful buboes, swollen lymph nodes, and internal bleeding, with death often occurring within 3 to 5 days of the onset of symptoms. Some variants of the disease, such as pneumonic plague, spread through respiratory droplets, making the contagion even more difficult to contain. The social consequences of the Black Death were profound and far-reaching. The pandemic disrupted nearly every aspect of daily life, from family structures to economic systems. The massive loss of life created severe labor shortages across Europe, as fields lay fallow and workshops closed due to the lack of workers. In response, surviving laborers, particularly peasants, began to demand higher wages and better working conditions, a development that struck at the very foundation of the feudal system. The traditional feudal relationship, which bound serfs to their lord's land in exchange for protection and subsistence, began to erode. Many serfs took advantage of the labor shortages to negotiate greater freedom or to migrate to towns and cities where economic opportunities were more plentiful. This shift marked a significant step toward a more mobile and independent peasantry and the eventual decline of feudalism. The Church, which had been the most powerful institution in medieval Europe, also faced challenges to its authority during this time. The inability of religious leaders to provide an explanation for or a cure to the plague led to widespread disillusionment. Many people viewed the Black Death as a punishment from God for humanity's sins, while others turned to extreme measures, such as the flagellant movement, in an attempt to atone. Flagellants, traveling in groups, would publicly whip themselves in acts of penance, believing their suffering could avert divine wrath. These practices often disrupted local communities and sometimes fueled violence, particularly against marginalized groups. Jewish communities, for instance, were scapegoated and accused of poisoning wells, leading to violent pogroms in various regions of Europe. Culturally, the trauma of the Black Death was reflected in the art and literature of the period. A pervasive sense of mortality and despair gave rise to macabre themes, with the dance of death emerging as a common motif in visual art. These allegorical depictions often portrayed skeletons leading individuals from all walks of life, kings, nobles, peasants, and clergy alike, into the grave, emphasizing the universality of death. Similarly, literature of the time grappled with themes of mortality and the fleeting nature of human existence. In addition to its cultural impact, the Black Death also triggered significant economic and demographic shifts. The reduction in population led to an oversupply of land and resources, which, in turn, lowered rents and food prices. For many peasants, this meant an improvement in living standards compared to the pre-plague period. However, the economic gains were not evenly distributed, and attempts by landowners and governments to enforce wage controls or reimpose traditional feudal obligations sometimes resulted in rebellion. The Peasants' Revolt of 1381 in England, for example, was fueled in part by frustrations over attempts to roll back the newfound freedoms of the lower classes. Though the rebellion was ultimately suppressed, it underscored the growing tensions between the old feudal order and the changing social dynamics of post-plague Europe. In the longer term, the Black Death profoundly altered the trajectory of European history. By breaking down traditional societal structures and creating a more fluid social hierarchy, it set the stage for the gradual rise of a market economy and the eventual emergence of early capitalism. The weakening of the Church's authority also opened the door to new intellectual and spiritual movements, laying the groundwork for the Reformation and the Renaissance. While the immediate aftermath of the Black Death was marked by immense suffering, its broader impact helped to shape the modern world, underscoring the resilience of human societies in the face of catastrophic events. Despite its challenges, the medieval period was not without cultural and intellectual achievements. Gothic architecture reached its zenith, with cathedrals serving as testaments to human creativity and devotion. Universities, such as those in Bologna, Paris, and Oxford, emerged as centers of learning, fostering the study of theology, law, and philosophy. The writings of figures like Thomas Aquinas sought to reconcile faith and reason, laying the intellectual groundwork for the Renaissance. Though the term Dark Ages suggests cultural stagnation, literature of the medieval period tells a different story, one of enduring creativity and profound insight into the human condition. While literacy was largely confined to the clergy and nobility, the written and oral traditions of this era reveal a vibrant tapestry of storytelling that reflected the complexities of medieval life. Notable works like Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy and Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales stand as towering achievements, blending realism with allegory to explore themes of morality, faith, and the human condition. Dante's Divine Comedy, composed in the early 14th century, was a groundbreaking literary endeavor. Written in the vernacular Italian rather than Latin, it marked a shift towards making literature more accessible to a broader audience. The poem vividly recounts Dante's allegorical journey through hell, purgatory, and paradise, guided by the Roman poet Virgil and later by Beatrice, a symbol of divine love. Each canto delves deeply into moral and theological themes, offering a comprehensive vision of medieval cosmology and spirituality. Dante's work bridged the gap between classical antiquity and the emerging Renaissance, incorporating elements of classical mythology alongside Christian doctrine. His richly detailed depictions of sin, redemption, and divine justice provided readers with a moral framework and a sense of hope in a tumultuous world. Similarly, Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales, written in the late 14th century, revolutionized English literature by presenting a vivid cross-section of medieval society. Through the voices of pilgrims journeying to the shrine of St. Thomas Becket in Canterbury, Chaucer created a dynamic portrait of human nature. Each tale, told in the vernacular Middle English, reflects the storyteller's background, values, and personality. From the bawdy humor of the Miller's Tale to the moral depth of the Parson's Tale, Chaucer's work revealed a world rich in diversity, contradictions, and shared humanity. His ability to blend satire, wit, and serious reflection on virtue and vice cemented his reputation as the father of English literature. By writing in Middle English rather than the more traditional Latin or French, Chaucer elevated the status of the English language and made his stories accessible to a wider audience. His characters, from the chivalrous knight to the cunning partner, reflected the social complexities of the time, offering insights into the interactions between different classes and professions during the medieval period. The Canterbury Tales also provided a platform for critiquing societal norms, including the corruption within the church and the hypocrisies of medieval institutions, demonstrating the evolving intellectual landscape of the Middle Ages. Beyond these iconic works, oral tradition remained a cornerstone of medieval literature, ensuring the preservation and dissemination of stories across generations. Bards, troubadours, and minstrels roamed the courts and villages of Europe, recounting epic tales of heroism, adventure, and love. These oral narratives, often accompanied by music, range from heroic epics like Beowulf to romantic chansons such as the Song of Roland. These tales were more than entertainment, they served as vehicles for transmitting cultural values, historical events, and moral lessons. Heroic sagas emphasized virtues like bravery, loyalty, and honor, while courtly love poetry explored themes of chivalry and the complexities of human emotion. The influence of religion also permeated medieval literature, shaping both its form and content. Hagiographies, or biographies of saints, recounted the lives and miracles of holy figures, inspiring devotion and providing moral exemplars for readers and listeners. Mystery plays and morality plays brought biblical stories and allegorical lessons to life in public performances, using drama to teach theological concepts to largely illiterate audiences. Works like Everyman, an allegory about life, death, and salvation, highlighted the medieval preoccupation with the afterlife and the moral responsibilities of individuals. The medieval period also saw the emergence of vernacular literature across Europe, with regional languages becoming the medium for storytelling. In Germany, the Nibelungenlied recounted the tragic saga of Siegfried and the Burgundians, blending pagan and Christian elements. In Spain, the epic El Cid celebrated the heroics of Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar, a Castilian knight, against the backdrop of the Reconquista. These regional epics affirm the growing cultural identities of European nations, offering a sense of continuity and pride during an era often marked by fragmentation and uncertainty. Trade and commerce experienced significant growth during the later Middle Ages. Towns and cities became hubs of economic activity, fostering the rise of a merchant class. Guilds played a crucial role in regulating trades, ensuring quality, and protecting the interests of their members. Markets and fairs attracted merchants from across Europe and beyond, facilitating the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies. This burgeoning economy challenged the feudal order and contributed to the development of more complex financial systems. By the end of the medieval period, Europe was undergoing profound transformation. The rise of centralized monarchies in England, France, and Spain marked the decline of feudalism and the emergence of nation-states. The Hundred Years' War between England and France exemplified this shift, as traditional feudal armies gave way to professional soldiers. The invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg in 1440 revolutionized communication, making books more accessible and fostering the spread of new ideas. The Middle Ages, though often romanticized or misunderstood, were a dynamic and transformative period in human history. From the hardships of peasant life to the grandeur of cathedrals and the devastation of the Black Death, this era was marked by resilience, creativity, and progress. Its legacy continues to influence the modern world, offering valuable insights into the complexities of society and the enduring human spirit.